Okay, let's go ahead and get started only because I like to be on time. I lived in Mexico, played in an orchestra once many years ago, and you really you come to appreciate how much more on time people in the States are. You just, it just drives you crazy when people are always, running behind, always. Anyway, the first thing I want to talk about is how to set up your instrument so that you have the least amount of trouble with it, is what we're going to talk about. So I'm getting my alto first. Now I have a curved head alto, and that's because I'm relatively short. I think I'm 5'5" now, but my arms just could not reach the straight tube alto. So a lot of people ask me, how do I set up the curve? There's no manual. Well, there is sort of a manual. I have an alto flute method in which I did talk about this. But anyway, so you put your fingers on D, and then you lift everything away, and it should just balance right there in your hands. We don't want to have to hold on to it. It's just like C flute. If you have to hold on over here, you're slowing down that finger, you're slowing down your whole hand. So if you put your fingers on D and lift everything away, again, no thumb in the back, it should just stay right there. And the secret is that the curve has to be slightly rotated in towards you. And so it's just leaning against your chin a little bit. So if you have the head joint more centered over the body, you have very little front-back balance. If you have it too rolled in towards you this way, you really have to cram it into your chin to get it to stay there. And that's not good for the sound, and it would tend to drop on you. So, and this is true for bass flute too. So you put your fingers on D, just lift everything away. It should just stay right there. You should be able to wiggle. It should be comfortable. If it's not stable and if it's not comfortable, then you've got to figure out what this angle is. And you can put little pieces of tape with markers on it to keep track of, oh, I tried that. Oh, that was too far. That wasn't far enough. But it's important that you find a place that is the most comfortable for you and your hands. Okay, so on bass, clearly, oh, I forgot. I'm going to talk about the straight tube alto, sorry, since I had my alto. Now, again, I have a curved head because my arms are short. If you have a straight tube alto, so the instrument is more like this, away from you, it's really difficult on your right hand, unless you have long arms, which I don't. So it's important that you go try an instrument for yourself in the store. You don't know which one's going to work for you, but you have the instrument is way out here. If your arms are long enough, you're fine. If not, many people end up bending over like this so that the right arm is closer to the flute, but you end up having to bend your neck. And the thought of spending, an hour with my neck over like that, that's just not good. That's just not good. So, but if you have a straight tube alto, maybe it's the perfect size for you. Maybe it's not. You might consider buying a separate head joint for it, a curved head joint. A lot of people have trouble balancing the straight head joint alto because it's really difficult to make a choice between holding the instrument up, again, it's farther from you and it's heavier, holding the instrument up, or keep it from rolling backwards on you. Again, this is the straight head alto. So years ago, there was a thumb port for alto, but unfortunately, as we have discovered, there is no standard diameter of the body of an alto or a bass. So the one size fits all item that they came up with only worked on about 30% of the alto flutes. Some it was just too small, some it was just too big and it fell off. So it wasn't until recently, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago, that a company called Mystic Media, it's spelled MisticMedia.com, Mystic Media, came up with something that they call, of all strange things, the Cobra. I was not in their marketing department. And it slides onto the flute, and there's a little shelf right here that sits on top of your thumb, and it keeps the flute from rolling backwards. So you can then be pressing slightly forward on the flute, and this will keep it from rolling backwards on you. And the important thing about this is there's an adjusting screw, and it's probably too small to see. there's an adjusting screw. And so you can loosen or tighten it depending on the bore size of your instrument. So this actually works. It is not cheap. It's about $50, but it's the only thing out there that works. So if you're someone who struggles balancing and holding up your straight head alto, this is the thing for you. Yeah, it's called the Cobra. I don't know why. All right, bass flute. We got the same issue. You got to put your fingers on D and lift everything away, and you hope that it balances. Now, some basses, many basses, come with a thumb crutch right here, which is supposed to deal with that problem of balancing the bass for you. I have yet to find one that I felt was comfortable for my hand. So, you know, but you buy the instrument that you have, but we really want to have it balance in our hands. You can say, again, nobody's touching, my thumb in the back is not touching, and I could just carry on a conversation with you. So it's all about where you're positioning that curve. It's got to lean back slightly against your chin to keep the instrument stable. Okay, let's talk about tuning. So if you have your bass and you're playing at a flute choir or some ensemble, it's pretty obvious that you're going to play an A. So the question becomes, which A am I going to play? Am I going to play the one in the staff or the one above the staff? You need to look at the music that you're playing. What is the range of the piece that I'm working on? And pick the note, the A, that's better suited to the music that you're playing. Because sometimes it does make a difference. We tend to play maybe a little sharper on the higher A. Maybe we tend to play a little flatter on the lower A. But what is the range of the piece that you're playing? So clearly you're going to be pulling the head joint in and out. And the instrument's kind of long here. In or out. This tenon tends to be very long, so you can pull it out a long ways if you have to. That's not usually a problem with the bass. You can pull this out as far as you need to pull it. On alto, however, we have a completely different problem. And that is that when you go to an orchestra or you're in your ensemble, your flute choir, they all want to use the A, but on alto flute, that sounding A is fingered D. And that note is not the greatest note to tune to. Mine happens to be a little bit sharp, but I know that it's a little bit sharp. If you don't know that your D, in other words, a sounding A, is a little bit sharp, you might pull out too much and you're going to end up being flat. So you have to find out for your particular instrument, is your D actually in tune with your A? Or is it sharp or is it flat? Again, D is not a great note to tune to. Now, when you go to the ensemble, again, they're not going to want to tune the note you need, which is the sounding E. They're not going to want to do that. So you have to tune your instrument before you get there, before everybody else is tuning. Make sure that you've got your fingered A in tune, and then you're going to have to go to your D, because that's the note, the pitch they're going to be playing, and you'll know, I got to lip it down a little bit, but I know to do that, but I really am in tune. So another big question, where do I pull out? If I've got a curved head instrument, there are three options, right? You can either pull out where the head joint goes into the curve, you can pull out where the curve goes into the body, or you could do half and half. And so many people ask me this question. I spent, I think, about 2 hours coming up with what I thought was at least the answer for my particular instruments. So I tested a lot of the three different positions, and I tested the same notes to see what would happen. And what I found was that the best thing to do is to pull out most where the head joint goes into the curve. That's where you want to pull out. Now, on an alto, that little tenon is very short. You can only pull out so far, or the head joint's going to fall out. Clearly, you don't want to pull out that far. If you still have to pull out, you're at maximum pull out here, then you're going to go and pull out where the curve goes into the body. And what I found was if I pulled out even 50-50 between the two possible locations, that the G just above the staff would be too sharp. It would start going sharp there at the G just above the staff. If I did most of the pulling out where the head joint went into the curve, it wasn't until the C, the fourth higher, that the instrument started getting a little bit too sharp. So I don't want to be extra sharp on those notes between G and C, just above the staff. Now, this doesn't mean it's going to work on your instrument, but it took me really about 2 hours to decide, yes, that really is what's happening, is that I really do need to pull out most here. And then if I still have to pull out, then I'm going to go for that. So again, on bass, you're going to do the same thing. You're going to pull out where the head joint goes into the curve. Okay, where the head joint goes into the curve. But if you want to test your instrument like I did, feel free. They're all different, and that's the challenge with low flutes. There is no standard anything. The key layouts, everything, bore sizes, there is not a standard. It's not like C flute. If you really want to know, you have to test your C flute and be willing to invest some time figuring it out. Another question that people ask me a lot is, why is the third octave so sharp? Since we're here talking about this part, why is it so sharp? The curved ones, straight altos tend to be not so sharp, but the curved altos and basses certainly are in the third octave. They're really sharp. And it took me a while. Again, I had to figure this out. Even on the C flute, if you look at your C flute head joint, if you have your alto straight head there, you can look at it. They need to have a continuous taper from the crown end, the closed off end, from the crown end of the head joint all the way to where the head joint goes into the body. Again, easier to see on a straight head joint. If you look at it, you go, oh yeah. So the crown end is narrower, less diameter than where it goes into the body. And that's what keeps the third octave of the C flute better in tune, is the fact that there's this continuous taper. They do not know how to make a continuous taper through the curve part right here. They haven't figured out how to do that yet. So that's why the third octave is sharp. Okay. So let me put that one down. Let's see what I'm going to do next. Okay. Oh, adjusting the foot joint. This is one of my favorite things. Because you struggle for so long and you realize it didn't have to be this hard. We play lots of foot joint notes when we play low flutes. I mean, why else do you have the instrument? You want to play those notes down there that the C flute can't play. So you've got your foot joint. I keep going the wrong direction on this thing. Okay, this one, I happen to have a low B on mine. Okay, the foot joint keys need to be as accessible as possible for your poor little finger. Okay, and it's already sort of stretched out there. Put your fingers on an E flat, and when you slide your little finger down, they should immediately go onto the C roller. Okay, you shouldn't have to make any extra adjustments. It should just slide right down to that C roller. If it doesn't, adjust the foot joint keys so that it's a little bit closer. So that when you slide down from that E flat key, we want to go right onto the C roller. We play a lot of C's, and the roller is much harder to find than the C sharp paddle, right? That's really quite big. Harder to find the C roller. So we want to adjust the foot joint so that we have the best possible chance of sliding right onto the C key. Now, I happen to have a B also on mine, but I don't play that many Bs on my bass. I try, but there aren't that many pieces where I can stick them in. But we play lots of C's. So make sure you set up the foot joint so that your little finger is happiest on the low C. Now, if you're playing C sharp in something, play so that you're more on the knuckle of your little finger, so that all you have to do is flex the tip of your little finger forward to play the C roller. So if you put the tip of your finger on the C sharp key, then you have to slide to get to the C key. So that's, again, it doesn't have to be that difficult. So put the C sharp, you want that knuckle, so that all you have to do is flex the tip of your finger. It's just poised right over that key. Now, for those evil composers who write C to E flat slurs, down there at the bottom, they're evil. So you just get a little bit of oil from the back of your ear. Makes it easy. And then you'll be amazed how easy that is. It just slides, just that slight bit of lubrication. It lasts for about a minute or two. So if you have to put it on at the beginning of a piece, I'm telling you, it makes you feel so much more confident that you're going to get those notes. And it's not an easy slide there. And again, all foot joint designs, the key designs are different. And you have to figure out what's going to work for your instrument. And you have to be willing to just experiment. Don't think that there is one way that this has to work and be set up and that's it. It's not true. It's just not true. All the foot joint keys on the different brands are all arranged slightly differently. They're bigger, they're smaller, they're more of an angle, whatever they are. Some of them have too much of a lip, if that makes any sense. When you try to slide from the E flat down, you run into this little wall, and that makes it harder too. It's almost like you have to lift your finger up a little bit before you can get down to the C keys. So it's one of the things that you test when you're trying out an instrument is, can I actually do that? Or am I running into the sides of those keys when I'm trying to slide down? But again, this oil behind the ear, it's a miracle. It's just a miracle, I'm telling you. Okay. All right, I'm going to talk about embouchure adjustments. When you're playing different instruments, like obviously we all do, you really have to know, what do I have to do? I'm on my C flute now, but now I'm going to piccolo, but now I'm going to alto flute, but now I'm going to bass, and now I'm going from bass back to C flute. You really have to have a well-defined pattern in your mind. What do I have to do to adjust my embouchure for the flute that I'm playing? And all I can say is you've got to practice switching so that you know what you have to do, but you can't just spend a short period of time on one of these other instruments and expect that your brain is going to remember exactly what those adjustments are. So as you get to the lower flutes, and I include contrabass in this as well, the embouchure just gets softer and softer. It just gets less and less grippy, if you want to think of it that way. And you have to know, how do I relax? What do I relax? What softens? How is that different? Do I blow the air slightly differently? And everybody has their own individual lips, and you have the instrument that you've got, and you just have to spend time practicing, trying to figure out, okay, what exactly do I have to do to make this instrument work? So speaking of switching instruments, when you're in a concert and you've got a piece on this instrument, you've got a piece on another instrument, then you got to switch to that. You need to practice them in the order in which they're in the concert. And that really helps a lot too, because then you'll know, oh yeah, I got to go from this thing to that thing. And it also, the reach is different and you have to get used to that. My hardest switch is from bass to C flute, because the C flute feels like a toy. It's just like, it feels like a toy. So it takes a minute or two of even handling the instrument to get yourself readjusted to the new size. But just realize, okay, that's a problem. It takes me a little while. So if I'm playing a bass piece, I do not program a really fast technical flute piece right after that, because the chances are I'm going to be fumbling around a little bit and I don't want to do that. So you find some way of organizing, if it's your particular concert, you organize it so that you have the best chance of success. If you're in some kind of ensemble, you frequently don't have any say as to which piece comes when. So you really have to, again, practice in order. And you don't have to play the whole piece. Play the end of one and then go right to the beginning of the next, and then go back and forth. What does it take? What does my mouth have to do? How does it feel different? How do I get used to that? And the more you practice it, the less difficult it becomes. But you also learn what works for me, what doesn't work for me. Okay. Octave clarity. This is another issue, especially on contra and bass. Going from one octave, let's say the bottom line E, up to the top space E, is a problem. And you have to spend some time really trying to identify very precisely, where do I have to change that air? How do I have to change that air, the angle of the air, the speed of the air, to make those octaves speak? And the lower the instrument is, the more difficult that becomes. It's sort of, it's one of those things that you have to work on. Sometimes you're happy that you're at least playing the right note. It might be in the wrong octave, but at least you've got an E, not an E flat or something else like that. So one thing that I've also will mention, that for E, this is the top space E and the top space F. they tend to be very fragile and they crack easily up or down. And we of course have to, again, really practice those. Even on alto, it's a problem. They're just not very stable. So there's a fairly simple solution to that. And when you're, here's E, right? Here's E. Whoops, going the wrong direction. Just put down that trill key under your fourth finger. Just put it down. Okay, you can all try that a minute. You're all on mute, so it won't matter. So play tongue with and without that trill key, and you'll find that it's just so reliable. It will not crack. It's just fabulous. It's a fabulous string. Also works for F. So if you have a string of tongued E's or F's, just leave that trill key down. I find it very useful. I have a pickup into the next bar and I want this nice light crisp note and it happens to be an E or an F, I just use that trill key and it's just fabulous. Now, some of you probably noticed, seems to be a little on the sharp side. Yes, it is a little bit on the sharp side. So if that bothers you, if it's a problem, just lift off the E flat key. Okay, so you got E natural. I know I'm asking a lot. We got E natural. We put down the trill key, but then we say, it really responds fabulously, but it's a little sharp. So then just lift off your E flat key. This also works for F. Also works for F. Now, clearly there are some combinations of notes where you can't get to the trill key. Like if you're playing a D right before, and you're trying to slur, can't really get to that trill key. I mean, maybe you could mush your finger over sideways. So it's not like this is going to solve every problem with E, but it really does help in certain situations. If you need a short E or you have a whole series of tongued E's or F's, this is a fabulous fingering to learn. So which brings me to alternate fingerings in general. I never used as many as when I started playing low flutes because you start just encountering different problems on C flute. I know piccolo has its own alternate fingerings. I'm not really a piccolo player. I have one, but I'm not really a piccolo player. Even just going from C to D in the middle of the staff, this is especially a problem on contrabass, but even on bass, there is just so much metal noise of those big keys going up and down. On contrabass, for example, sometimes there's as much metallic noise going on as there is pitch coming out of the instrument. So for C to D, again, that's just a lot of fingers and a lot of keys. I mean, you can hear, right, all this metallic noise going on. We want to avoid that if we can. So my suggestion is, when you go from C to D, just leave your right hand fingers down. Just move your left hand. Leave your right hand fingers down. Cuts the noise in half, at least. Okay, just try that. Just leave those right hand fingers down. Oh, I've got this out of adjustment. So D and C sharp or D to C. Just leave your right hand fingers down. This also can really speed up your technique if you have those notes. Like they're at the bottom of a run, and then you're going back up, and you've got D, C, D at the bottom of the run. Just leave your right hand fingers down. Again, the noise factor alone makes this worthwhile. But again, it really speeds things up. It will really speed up that particular passage. Again, the bigger the flute you have, the more a problem this is. On contra, and I play sub in G, there's just so much noise. So, and again, okay, so maybe the C's a little flat. Okay, but if you're going fast enough, nobody notices, but they will notice if there's all this clacking going on. I'm going to talk about alternate fingerings in general. I'm getting off my outline. Who did that? Alternate fingerings in general. Again, I use a lot of them. I have an alto method and a bass flute method. They're available on Amazon around the world. Flute Center of New York has them. There's an alternate fingering chart in there, especially for the third octave. The pitch is just such a problem. But pick just one alternate fingering. If you're not used to using alternate fingerings, pick one. Get used to that one. You have to sort of convince your brain that it's okay, because it's going to tell you things like, that's not the right fingering for that note. And you have to convince it that it's okay. I'm using this because of this particular reason. I'm doing this because I've chosen to do this. And here's this fingering. And it takes you a while to get used to it. Get that as part of your technique. Then you can add another one. Now, I have my own little shorthand way of reminding myself which alternate fingering I used where, because there are different alternate fingerings depending on the notes you're coming from or going to, depending on how loud or soft you are, what octave you're in. Again, there are lots of variables. You want to have a couple of options. Sometimes you can do enough with just your embouchure. That's fine. But sometimes, like the third octave of a curved alto or of a bass is like a quarter step sharp. When you're playing loud up there, it's really difficult to get that in tune without alternate fingerings. So don't be afraid to explore some alternate fingerings. Okay, I don't have too much more time. Bass flute supports. I'm going to quickly go through bass flute supports because this is a really common problem. And even if you don't play bass flute, you probably have a friend who plays bass flute. So there's a bunch of options. One of them, which we all probably have, I just get a black Manhasset stand and I put it so that the flat part is up at the top. I put a cloth over it. And so when I'm playing my flute, I can rest the top of my instrument right on top of that cloth. So this is good at home, not so great for rehearsals where you have to travel, and will be able to travel to rehearsals at some point. Not so great for rehearsals because who wants to carry yet another music stand? So you can do other things like, here's one of those wire folding ones that we all got in band, and we probably have 3 or 4 down in the basement somewhere. Do the same thing. Get that cloth because you don't want to scratch your flute. Put the cloth over one of the little segments here. You can put your instrument right there and it'll keep it from, it won't be such a strain on your arm to hold up the bass. It just, after a while, your arm just starts dying and it's hard to concentrate and play well if your arm's going, stop! Okay, other options. There is something called the bass flute lap crutch. That's what it looks like. So the curved part sits on my leg. The bass goes right in this little cradle. It's very lightweight. It's very compact. It has a little swivel little joint here that you can adjust so it goes up and down. But playing it standing up is not so easy to do. They've sort of solved that, but they didn't really. You're supposed to hook this over your belt if you're standing up. Well, that doesn't work that well. But anyway, this is a nice, lightweight, compact alternative. It's just hard to get a hold of these sometimes. And the other problem being that it is not attached to either you or the flute. So once you want to pick your flute up, you have to grab this immediately with your other hand or it's going to fall. And you don't want it falling on your neighbor or on your flute or on your foot or anything. There's another product called the Bass Flute Support. That's a clever name. Bass Flute Support that has come out in the last, 2 years. And it actually has a clamp and it will clamp onto the bass for you. And it also has a little part that sits down on your leg. And then when you lift it up, you don't have to worry about grabbing it, but it's like $250. It's not a cheap item. There's also something called a bass boost, which is a series of telescoping rods that you can adjust. You can play it either sitting or standing. It's got a nice little cool design at the top that your flute rests in. It's the bottom swivels so that you can move very freely. It really looks nice. For a performance, it would be absolutely acceptable. It's about, $180. It's a little bulky, and that's the problem with that. Yet one more bulky thing. We need to all become pack mules when we do stuff like this. Okay, do I need to stop in like 2 minutes? Can somebody give me a yes or a no?
You have about 15 minutes, Chris.
Oh, good. All right.
Plenty of time.
Plenty of time. I couldn't remember how long this was. Okay. My particular brand comes with a graphite rod, and it has this fabulous little swivel joint here at the top which screws on to a spot on the back of my flute, and the little foot sits on the chair between my legs, and it's absolutely movable. It's fabulous, but it only comes with this particular brand. But that works really well. If you happen to see someone who has one of these on their flute, you'll know they spent a lot of money. Okay, there's another brand of bass that comes with a support. It's like almost like a saxophone. It's got a rope little thing that comes around your neck, and then there's a little cup down here, and it's supposed to have, has a little stick that sits right there. The problem is, as soon as you move, the cup thing just sort of goes like that. The instrument is fabulous. I'm leaving out instrument names. The instrument is fabulous, but their support still needs a lot of work. They really haven't figured that one out yet. Okay. I'm going to talk briefly about breathing. When we play low flutes, we really need a lot of air, and you need to be sure that your breathing apparatus is working to maximum efficiency. You've got to take in a lot of air, and you have to use it as efficiently as possible. So I'm just going to throw out some numbers. If you play C flute, you should be able to hold a soft note for at least 35 seconds. On alto, about 30, on bass, about 25. If you can't go that long, you need to go back and think about how much air you're taking in and then what you're doing with it when it's coming out. Because both sides of that equation can be a problem. We use a lot of air. And if you're constantly running out of air at in places in the phrase where you don't want to be, it's hard to play well. So you need to go back and make sure that that's all working well. And there are, of course, people who spend hours, at master classes talking about breathing, because it is so absolutely fundamental to what we do. And as, again, low flutes players, we've really got to make sure all that is working well, and that not only are we taking a lot in, but that we've learned how to use it really efficiently. We don't want to use more than necessary. I want to talk about tone development. Almost all of us want to have a good tone. So if you want to have a good tone, you have to spend time just really listening to your sound. And there are many flute books, like De La Sonorité has great exercises for C flute. They need a little bit of adaptation to work for bass. Clearly, we don't need to work so much in the third octave. It's the lowest octave and that middle octave that we want to spend time in. In general, you want to start with a good note, a note that you feel, I can play that. That's really easy. Like, say, a B in the middle of the staff. A fingered B in the middle of the staff. And this is a nice, easy note to play. And I'm going to work my way down just a few notes at a time, very, very slowly, just listening to my sound and deciding, is it too airy? Do I need to find a slightly different position? Do I need to go left? Do I need to go right? Do I need to go up? People's lips are different thicknesses. Sometimes you actually need to move the instrument up a little bit on your lip. One common thing I find with my students is that they're blowing too much over, and I tell them to blow down towards their left elbow, and we get a little bit more air into the flute and less going over, which is where a lot of that air noise comes from. One thing I will suggest is that you start collecting your own tone warm-up collection, just pieces that you really like to play, that you're not working on for any particular performance, and it could be from any genre. So I have about 100 in my collection, and it could be any style that you want. I love, things from musicals, and so I have a whole bunch of those in there. Just find pieces that you like, make a photocopy for yourself, and put it in a binder so they're all together. Mine happens to be purple. I like purple. So there they all are. You can just open up the binder and you can flip through. Oh, I feel like playing that one today. Food, glorious food from Oliver. Whatever it is, if you play something that makes you happy, that's a really nice way to start a practice session. Okay. Back to, just talking about tone in general. It does take a lot of very concentrated thought to come up with a tone that you like. And we're trying to get a sound that's full, that's resonant, and doesn't waste air, that I can play softly, that I can play loudly, and that makes me happy when I play it. Sometimes we're trying to find a new instrument, and you play one and you go, ah, I got to have that one. And that's what's happened to me a couple of times. You go to the NFA convention and you play an instrument, you go, it just takes your breath away, and you got to have it. And that's what we're looking for. We want a tone that when people hear us play, they just are enthralled with our sound. And finding that takes a lot of work, but you just have to keep at it slowly, a few notes at a time. Start where you sound good, gradually work toward the places where you're less happy, and see if you can't make that good tone sound better. Okay, on low flutes, we do a lot of work down at the bottom. So try to find exercises or make up exercises in which you're practicing down at the bottom end of your instrument a lot. We're down there much more than C flute. You've got to be agile down there, or you're going to just have a lot of trouble playing a bunch of other pieces, because that's where we are. We're down there a lot. So I actually, in my method books, I came up with a scale pattern, which emphasizes the bottom turnaround. It's sort of, the Moise pattern, as we all know, starts on tonic, goes all the way up to either a B flat or a B natural, and then it comes all the way down to a low C or C sharp, and then goes back up to tonic again. So I took that idea and I said, but what bass and alto and contra really need is that bottom turnaround. We're not so concerned with the third octave, but that bottom turnaround. So I just incorporated that into every scale, where we go down there all the time. But come up with exercises for yourself. That makes really good players. You find a problem, you come up with your own exercises to solve that for yourself. Okay, let's say you actually, at some point, we're all going to want to play in an orchestra. What are the pieces that I might expect to find at an audition? And there are usually 3 of them that are the most common. There's the Ravel, Daphnis and Chloe, Holst, the Planets, and the Stravinsky Rite of Spring. Those are the 3 big ones that you could expect to see. And sometimes that's how you get into an orchestra, because they need somebody who'll come and play alto flute on some piece. But those are the 3 big ones. So there are actually books that have these in them. So this one, I'll hold it up a little higher. Obviously, orchestral excerpts for alto flute. This is, I got this, it's from Amsterdam. It's Broekmans and Van Poppel is the publisher. And this one, I got it at Carol and Nussbaum's. I mean, they're floating around in this country. And this one actually does have the Ravel, Daphnis, and Chloe in it, which is I think the most common one that's asked for in orchestra auditions. And it's hard. Let me tell you, there's stuff in here that you just go, they've got to be kidding. like this page. And it's really fast. Anyway, but this is the only book I found that actually has the Ravel in it. There is a score of the Ravel in the public domain, but it's the score, and it's not a very high quality. It's fuzzy, but this book actually does have that. It also has the Rite of Spring, which is not as hard as you would think. The hardest part is knowing when to come in. The parts that you play themselves are not that hard. And then there's the Holst, the Planets, and they nicely. Just Stravinsky goes on forever. There's some other Stravinsky. Anyway, so this is the one they picked out from the Holst, the Planets. But anyway, those are the top 3. There are other ones, and they are in this book. There's that book, and then there's also this Trevor Y book called the Alto Flute Practice Book, but it's like 75% orchestral excerpts. So the title is a little misleading. There are some things in it that for practice, but it's mostly orchestral excerpts. Does not have the Ravel in it because the publisher wouldn't give him permission to put it in there, which I thought was sort of curious. But anyway, if you're thinking that you might like to audition for an orchestra, those are the 3 big alto pieces that they might ask you. If you're looking for repertoire in general, there is a website. It's the lowflutesfestival.org. We did have a Low Flutes Festival 3 years ago. Makes me sad to think of it. I organized it. I can't believe I did that. I made it happen. I had people from Turkey and Japan and Australia, and it was fabulous. Anyway, I put a repertoire list on that website, lowflutesfestival.org, and the repertoire is it has, like easy, intermediate, and advanced and professional. So there's just 4 different levels, and it's solo pieces and then pieces with keyboard, and then, chamber music with 2 instruments, and then trios, quartets, sort of organized like that. So it has alto and bass and contrabass, and it has pieces where there's a solo low flute with flute choir. I mean, there's all sorts of things in that particular list. So if you're looking for repertoire, that's a good place. There is also a Low Flutes Facebook group that has about 2,800 people in it, and all sorts of great information, and people sell their used instruments. They talk about some problem that they have and who's, got a solution, or I'm trying to find a curved head joint. Does anybody have an extra? All sorts of questions. I happen to be in charge of that too. So ask to join, and I'll let you come in. And also, the last thing I just want to talk about is on my website, I have things like a list of low flutes repair people. And it's not just in the US, but many countries around the world that have been recommended by low flutes players who've had their flute repaired by that person. So that's a nice resource. And I also have a lot of these performance aids. I talk about a lot of those performance aids and give more information about those. So anyway, are there any questions? Somebody is saying that they have a Haynes alto, but he's 6'4". Right. Yeah. You don't have a problem.
I have a question. Is there the equivalent thumb for the bass that you mentioned?
No.
No. The right hand, yeah.
Oh, okay. There is something called a flute gel that, I can't believe I sort of spaced these out, sort of. Okay, a flute gel, it has a little adhesive thing. I have one on my bass, and it's got a cushion. No, I think I did mention these. It's a little cushion. So it's better than nothing, but no, there is no thumb support for the bass. They haven't come up with one yet. I also forgot all these things I forgot. There's also a lip plate patch. I don't think I'd even talked about that you can put right by the opening in your mouthpiece. Keeps your, if your chin gets it all sweaty, it keeps the instrument more stable. Again, if you're outside or you're under hot lights, I tell you, the alto, especially the bass, they just start wiggling all over the place. Lip plate patch. Okay. Any other questions? Yes, Catherine.
Yes. I was wondering I thought what you said about the intonation and which part of the flute to pull out was very interesting. And I was wondering if you looked at the effect of the cork position.
That's not usually the problem.
Okay.
That's not usually the problem. I mean, corks do wear out and they dry up, and but you would know right away if when you're turning the crown, and if it just keeps turning, you have a problem. But I know it's also a position, but that's rarely the problem.
Okay, so you think they're in the optimum position when you buy it?
They should be.
Because the optimum position might be different for different flutes, and they might not even know what the right position is.
Well, you would hope that they would know at the place where they manufactured them, that they put them in the right place. I'm just telling you, that's rarely the problem.
Okay.
It's just rarely the problem. Okay, any other questions? Just sort of raise your hand, either in reality or down at the bottom. You can raise your hand. Okay, I'm not seeing anybody else asking any questions. Okay, so Deirdre, it's time, is it not?
Yeah, it is time. I want to say thank you very much, Chris. A lot of what you said, I don't play low flutes. I have an alto flute that I just gave up on years ago, but I'm going to go back to it now. Yeah, so you've a lot of what you discussed, I think will be very helpful for me as I return to it. I want to thank you so much. It's wonderful presentation.
Okay, yeah, lots of information. Okay, I'm taking an applause.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you all for listening. Okay.
Okay, take care. Bye.
Bye.